Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Authorities in southern Germany say that a municipal worker and his wife are facing hundreds of theft charges this week after they were accused of stealing more than €1 million in an unusual embezzlement plot involving parking meters. According to reports, the whole thing was uncovered sometime in October when law enforcement officials in the town of Kempten were alerted to strange activity in several bank accounts. Cash was regularly being deposited into these accounts and then moved around in what bank employees suspected could be some kind of money laundering operation. When an investigation was launched, the accounts were linked to a married couple, a local 40-year-old man and his 38-year-old wife. And as authorities began looking closer, they realized what was going on. After doing some digging, police say they figured out that the man was a parking enforcement worker and that he was stealing from the meters that he had access to as part of his job. It's unclear how long the scheme had been going on for, but officials say it was likely months or even years. The stolen cash was then put into bank accounts and allegedly laundered by the couple. Over the course of the scheme, they were able to embezzle more than €1 million, or $1.15 million US. Following a police search on November 24th, the husband and wife were both taken into custody. The man is now facing charges relating to 720 separate incidents of theft, while the wife has been charged with aiding and abetting theft, also in 720 cases. The whole thing reportedly came as a shock to local officials, who are now apparently scrambling to change the town's parking meter system from a cash-based one to an electronic one. In the meantime, both suspects remain in custody at separate detention facilities. Officials in Nigeria say that a massive rescue effort is underway this week after more than 300 students and teachers were kidnapped during a pre-dawn raid on a Catholic boarding school in Niger State. The terrifying situation unfolded in the early morning hours of Friday, November 21st at St. Mary's Private Catholic School in the locality of Papiri. According to reports, armed men stormed the boarding school at around 2 a.m., forcing children and staff into the surrounding forest. It was later confirmed that 303 children and 12 teachers were taken, a number that was significantly higher than initial estimates. The students range in age, with some as young as 10. Local media later reported that 50 of the children managed to flee between Friday and Saturday and were reunited with their parents, although police said that they had not yet independently verified this. Niger state officials say that the boarding school had ignored an earlier directive to close its boarding facilities due to intelligence warnings about a heightened risk of attacks. Parents told local reporters that they were shocked that no additional security had at least been stationed at the school despite the threat. The abductions have ignited widespread grief and anger across Nigeria. One woman, whose nieces, aged 6 and 13, were among those taken, told reporters through tears, quote, "I just want them to come home." Another parent, whose daughters attended the school but were not among the victims, said, quote, "Everybody is weak. It took everybody by surprise." Search teams made up of the military, police, and local vigilantes are combing forests and remote paths believed to have been used by the attackers. Authorities across several northern states ordered schools to temporarily shut down to prevent further mass kidnappings. The Nigerian president has postponed international travel to address the escalating security crisis and has ordered the recruitment of 30,000 additional police officers, including redeployment of officers normally assigned to VIP protection. Sadly, this kind of kidnapping is not uncommon in Nigeria and is part of a larger surge of violence across the region. Earlier in the week, gunmen kidnapped more than 20 schoolgirls from a boarding school in nearby Kebbi State, and a church in Kwara State was also attacked, with 2 worshippers killed and dozens abducted. Officials say ransom kidnappings by armed groups, often referred to locally as bandits, have become a major threat in many areas, despite laws banning ransom payments. Still, the scale of Friday's abduction is particularly noteworthy. The kidnapping is even larger than the 276 girls taken from a school in Chibok in 2014. An event that drew global attention and sparked the Bring Back Our Girls movement. Experts warn that the security situation has deteriorated sharply in the past year, with both Christian and Muslim communities targeted by heavily armed criminal groups and jihadist factions. Despite ongoing rescue efforts, many families in Papiri say that they feel abandoned and desperate for information. One man, who had 4 of his grandchildren kidnapped, stated in an interview, quote, "We don't know what is happening now because we have not heard anything since this morning. The children who were able to escape have scattered, and the only information we are getting is that the attackers are still moving with the remaining children into the bush." As of now, at least 253 children and all 12 teachers remain missing. No criminal group or organization has officially taken responsibility for the mass kidnapping, and the situation is still developing. Authorities in the Croatian capital of Zagreb say that a pair of teenagers have been arrested and charged after they were accused of starting a massive fire that destroyed a historic building early last week. Authorities say the blaze began late Monday night, November 17th, inside the former Vjesnik Publishing Tower, a 16-story modernist landmark from the 1970s. The fire broke out shortly before midnight and quickly tore through the upper floors, with flames pouring from multiple windows as more than 160 firefighters worked through the night to contain it. Investigators say the suspects arrived at the property around 9:50 p.m., jumped a fence, entered the vacant building, and climbed to the 15th floor. There, one teen reportedly lit a cardboard box stuffed with paper, while another set additional papers on fire. The flames spread rapidly to surrounding rooms, causing extensive structural damage and destroying government archives stored inside. The suspects fled when the fire grew out of control. The tower continued burning throughout the night, and by Tuesday morning, the building had been reduced to a charred shell. Experts have since warned that it will probably need to be demolished due to the severity of the damage. Thankfully, though, no injuries were reported. Police announced on Friday, November 21st, that they had taken the 2 teens into custody and had filed criminal charges for serious offenses against public safety and endangering life and property. 3 additional minors were allegedly involved, though it's unclear what will happen to them. The Vjesnik Tower was once home to a major publishing house that produced many of Croatia's leading newspapers and magazines. The building has been vacant in recent years, but is still considered an important piece of Zagreb's architectural history. Police said the 2 arrested teens had no prior criminal record. After the investigation, they were turned over to a detention supervisor, and a criminal report has been submitted to prosecutors. Authorities have not stated what consequences the suspects involved may face, as the investigation is ongoing. The heartbroken family of a Turkish teenager is demanding answers and accountability this week after he was killed in a horrific act of workplace violence, a crime that the alleged perpetrators initially tried to write off as an unfortunate prank. The disturbing incident happened on Friday, November 14th, at a carpentry workshop in Bozova district, a rural area in Turkey's Şanlıurfa province. According to multiple local media outlets, the teen, 15-year-old Muhammed Kendirci, had been working as an apprentice there when 2 others at the shop, one of whom was identified as fellow apprentice Habib Aksoy, allegedly restrained him. The pair reportedly tied Muhammad's hands, forcibly removed his pants, and inserted a high-pressure air compressor hose into his rectum. They then turned it on, resulting in catastrophic injuries to his internal organs. Medical teams were called to the scene shortly after the incident, and Muhammad was taken to 2 different hospitals where he was eventually placed in intensive care. Despite undergoing treatment for 5 days, though, he died on the morning of November 19th. Following the assault, Aksoy was initially arrested but released on probation as the investigation continued. After Muhammad's death, though, he was taken back into custody. Reports did not immediately clarify what charges he may face, but officials confirmed the investigation is active and ongoing. Muhammad's funeral was held at a local cemetery this week, where relatives and community members gathered to mourn. The case has sparked widespread anger and concern across Turkey, especially after it was discovered that the alleged perpetrators tried to claim that what had happened to Muhammad was just a prank. While the teen's loved ones are now demanding accountability and justice, they're not the only ones. In the wake of the incident, some within the Turkish government are calling for a complete overhaul of the country's high school apprenticeship system. The program Muhammad was part of at the time of his death is run by what's known as a Vocational Education Center, or MESEM. While these programs were originally intended to help high school-age students acquire experience in skilled trades, critics say the reality is much darker. They claim that instead of providing young people with hands-on education, instead, students like Mohammed are being exploited as cheap sources of child labor. In a scathing statement this week, politician Aylan Nazlaika pointed out that many of the people being pushed into these vocational centers are from low-income families who are told that it's a great opportunity for their kids. However, many of the jobs are in industries with dangerous working conditions with little to no oversight. Nazlaika also noted that Mohammed is at least the 16th young person to be killed at work while participating in one of these programs this year alone. In addition to an overhaul of the system, she and others are now calling for much stronger protections for young people in the workplace. In the meantime, authorities say the investigation into Mohammed's death remains ongoing. Representatives from England's Wiltshire Police say that a local community has been left in mourning this week after a 55-year-old woman was found dead in her home and a 13-year-old girl was arrested on suspicion of her murder. According to local media, officers were called to Baden Close in the town of Swindon at around 7 p.m. on November 21st, following reports of a disorder inside the property. When they arrived, they found 55-year-old Sarah Forrester unconscious and not breathing. Paramedics did what they could, but sadly, she was pronounced dead at the scene. No other injuries were reported. Police launched a major investigation and later that same night detained a teenage girl in connection with the incident. She was taken into custody for questioning, and a cordon was set up around the home as crime scene investigators worked through the night. Detectives say they are not looking for any additional suspects and that there was no wider risk to the public. The news stunned the community. Sarah, a mother of two, was well known locally for her work as a counselor at the Kelly Foundation, a local charity that supports individuals with severe anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. Colleagues described her as devoted, kind, and someone who brought compassion to every person she worked with. In a statement, the charity said staff were, quote, heartbroken at the sudden loss of our lovely Sarah, and that her death has been a hugely traumatic event, especially for her young children. A neighbor echoed these sentiments, calling her a good friend and a dedicated parent who was always willing to help others. Police presence in the area remained heavy throughout the weekend as officers spoke with residents and conducted further checks. Wiltshire Police urged the public not to speculate about the circumstances surrounding the death, noting the teen involved and the sensitive nature of the investigation. The girl was later released on bail while inquiries continue. Detectives say the woman's family has been informed and are being supported. Neighbors also told local reporters that they had previously overheard raised voices near the home, though nothing appeared unusual on the day of the incident. One woman said that she didn't even realize anything had happened until police arrived on the street that evening, expressing shock at the news. Investigators have not released any information about what may have led up to the fatal altercation, and authorities say the probe will, quote, remain ongoing for some time. Officers have encouraged anyone with information to speak with neighborhood police, who are expected to remain in the area until further notice. Authorities in the Italian region of Lombardy say that a man confessed to an equally bizarre and unsettling scheme this week after he was busted for fraudulently collecting his dead mother's pension for years while pretending to be her. The strange plot, which some media sources have likened to a real-life crossover between the movies Mrs. Doubtfire and Psycho, reportedly began to unravel about 2 weeks ago at a local government office in the town of Borgo Virgilio. According to police, at first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It looked like an elderly woman had just come in to renew her identification card. She said her name was Graziella Dalloglio, and her last ID from 10 years ago had recently expired. A photo was taken and the paperwork was filled out, but throughout the process, an employee who was handling the renewal got a strange feeling. Though the person in front of him was certainly dressed like an old woman, complete with a patterned blouse, lipstick, a pearl necklace, and old-fashioned earrings, something seemed off. Their voice kept wavering in pitch, and they looked much younger than Graziella was supposed to be. The biggest giveaway, though, was the hands. They did not look like they belonged to an 85-year-old woman. It turned out that's because they didn't. This was not Graziella. It was her 56-year-old son, a former nurse who had since become unemployed. Needless to say, the government employee was suspicious, but they knew that whoever this was, they would need to come back to the office to actually pick up the ID when it was ready. So after allowing the suspect to leave, they immediately shared their concerns with their superiors, and an investigation was launched. Sure enough, when the photos taken that day were compared to Graziella's pictures from 10 years ago, it was clear what had happened. Things got even more sinister, though, when they looked into Graziella's tax records, and they learned that all of her paperwork was being submitted as usual, and that her pension was still being collected. This was despite the fact that when they conducted interviews, no one in the area could remember actually seeing Graziella in years. When the time came for the ID to be picked up, sure enough, the person resembling Graziella showed back up at the government office. This time, though, police were waiting and said that they needed to ask a few more questions. That's when Graziella's son allegedly admitted that it was actually him dressed up in his mother's clothes and makeup. He'd even cut his hair to more closely resemble hers. While the scheme is mildly amusing in its stupidity, the ending to the whole thing was quite sad. When police searched Graziella's home, they found her mummified remains. Her body had been covered in a blanket and sleeping bag and hidden in one of the rooms there. Authorities estimated that she had been dead for at least 3 years, and that throughout this time her son had been fraudulently pocketing her annual pension worth the equivalent of about $61,000 US. Right now, it's believed that Graziella died of natural causes, though investigators say they're still working to confirm that. In the meantime, it's perhaps the mayor of the town who summed up the situation best, stating in an interview, quote, "It's a very, very sad story, certainly one of great loneliness." Authorities in the Australian state of Queensland revealed a heartbreaking twist in a case that recently generated nationwide headlines, announcing that a man who publicly pleaded for help after claiming his SUV and beloved family dog had been stolen is now the one facing charges. 43-year-old Nathan McEwen made multiple emotional appeals earlier this month, telling the public that his Toyota Hilux had disappeared on the night of November 7th. He told police it was taken while he was at a friend's place in the Brisbane suburb of Wynnum. That wasn't what most people were primarily concerned about, though. It was what McEwen told authorities next. At the time of the alleged theft, he said his German Shepherd, Arnie, was asleep in the back of the vehicle. News of the missing dog and SUV quickly garnered viral attention, sparking nationwide concern, volunteer searches, and an online petition pushing for tougher animal protection laws. People were even more outraged when it was reported that 10 days later, the vehicle was recovered, but that sadly, Arnie was dead inside. However, the most gut-wrenching development was still yet to come. You see, Queensland police now say the entire theft story was fabricated. According to investigators, McEwen allegedly drove the Hilux himself to where it was later found. After parking the vehicle in Brisbane's Fortitude Valley around 10:30 p.m. on November 7th, he simply walked away, leaving Arnie inside with no way out. The next morning, police say McEwen told his partner that the SUV had been stolen. Believing him, she reported the theft, kicking off the massive 10-day search by police, rescue groups, and members of the public. McEwen has now been charged with one count of breaching a duty of care to an animal. Detectives say his partner had no idea the theft claim was false and believe she was reporting a genuine crime. According to neighbors, she was seen breaking down in tears when informed by police about what had really happened. As investigators revealed the tragic news this week, they acknowledged the distress the case caused, but thanked the public and media for the outpouring of support during the search effort. The case is expected to be heard in a Brisbane court next month. Queensland police say the investigation remains active, but no motive has been released at this time. Authorities in the Brazilian state of Santa Catarina say that they have made an arrest in a horrifying case this week after a female graduate student was attacked and murdered on a popular coastal trail, a crime that has sparked nationwide outrage and renewed calls for women's safety. The victim, 31-year-old Catarina Kempten, was killed on Friday morning, November 21st. According to police, she left her home in the city of Florianópolis around 6:50 a.m. to go to a swimming class, but never arrived. By 9 a.m., her partner noticed that she had not returned. Around noon, messages began circulating in a neighborhood group chat that her belongings had been found along the Matadero Trail, which Caterina normally used to get to her class. The partner contacted Caterina's swimming instructor, who confirmed that she had not shown up. He then called the military police. During a subsequent search, 2 men approached officers and reported that they had found a body just off the trail. Emergency responders and forensic teams were sent in, and the awful discovery was confirmed. It was Caterina, and there was nothing anyone could do. She was dead. Investigators soon identified a suspect through a combination of security camera footage in the area and pictures taken by a pair of female tourists who noticed a man acting suspiciously on the trail. In the images, the man was wearing distinctive clothing that officers later found inside his home. When police arrived to question him, he confessed, saying that he had strangled Caterina with a shoelace and sexually assaulted her. He also led officers to the bushland area where he had attempted to hide her body. Forensic evidence was collected from Caterina's remains and has since been sent off for analysis. The suspect has been identified as Giovanni Correa Meyer, a 21-year-old man originally from the state of Rio Grande do Sul. However, he has lived in Florianópolis since 2019 and reportedly walked the Matadero Trail often. He told investigators that on the morning of the crime he was returning from a party where he had been drinking before encountering Caterina. Police said his statements were disorganized and included claims that he heard voices telling him to act. After the murder, police connected Meyer to a separate unsolved case from 2022 involving a sexual assault on a 69-year-old woman in her home. At the time, Meyer was working as a gardener at the woman's residence and had been interviewed, but only as a witness. With Caterina's case now under investigation, police have reopened that 2022 file and will compare DNA evidence from both crimes. This week's crime has come as a devastating blow to Caterina's loved ones, especially because she had accomplished so much and still had so much ahead of her. The 31-year-old was a graduate student in linguistic and literary studies at the Federal University of Santa Catarina and had earned her degree in English literature in 2022. Friends said she was a dedicated teacher and had plans to pursue a doctorate. Before joining her program at UFSC, she studied production engineering and participated in several student organizations. On Saturday morning, the day after her death, friends, colleagues, and neighbors retraced the route along the trail to protest the violence and demand safer public spaces. Those who gathered expressed grief, anger, and determination to advocate for women's rights to freely move through their communities without fear. Meyer, meanwhile, remains in pretrial detention and will be charged with femicide and sexual assault. Police say the investigation will continue as they review evidence, compare past forensic samples, and interview additional witnesses. Hey there. Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Luke and I are so grateful for our incredible Crime Zone community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help Crime Zone continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to support the channel, there are a couple of options. We've got a thriving community over on Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. Head over to patreon.com/crimezone to learn more and to meet some of the awesome people whose names are currently on screen. If that isn't your thing, we've also now launched channel memberships so you can join directly here on YouTube. Channel members get a lot of the same perks as on Patreon, including extra content, without the added hassle of having to go off-platform. Now, that being said, we know times are tough and that not everyone is able to support financially. Regardless of your situation though, we want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.